Greetings, everyone. Adventurers, travelers, and fellow keepers of the lake. Welcome to GM Academy. So, let me just... There is a lot of technical stuff that I need to set up first, and then we can begin. Ta-ta-ta. There you go. So, what is this? Well, there is a lot going on in this hobby right now, and if you're here, you probably want to know more about it. But all the content that I've seen so far comes from comes from a place with a lot of legacy thinking, comes from seeing this hobby as mostly D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. You probably heard about that game, very popular. But if you look at the larger expanse of TTRPGs and the art of GMing, you see that this is a medium like any other, and there is a lot to learn and a lot to get familiar with, and there is a lot of games that you can be playing. So in this course type thing, I would like to come at you not from the perspective of, hey, this is a game that we have been playing for 50 to 70 years and here is everything that we learned from it, but I want to approach it from, hey, like with reading and movies, there is a lot here, and there are genres, there are different games, there are different settings and different stories. So why don't we approach this from like a perspective of not tying ourselves to any game in particular, right? So who is this for? Well, for everyone. I have been playing these games for a while, and I would still like to see something like this being done, so that's why we're here. So if you have never heard about TTRPGs, yeah, this is for you, but if you are an experienced veteran of the hobby, maybe my point of view brings something new to your table as well. But who am I? Well, I am just a guy. I am Andrew. I've been running this channel for almost 2 years now, and I've tried a bunch of different things, and here we are. I've been playing TTRPGs for about 4 or 5 years now, so I'm not like those people who have played for their whole life, but this hobby just arrived at my country, which is Serbia, so I didn't have all those legacy thoughts and things in my life, and I've started exploring this hobby from a very strange angle by never playing Dungeons and Dragons, by playing so many different games. That's why I'm making this. During the day, I am a programmer, software developer, engineer, however you want to call it, and I do a lot of artistic things. I'm designing a TTRPG of my own, as all people on YouTube talking about this hobby are, and yeah, I'm also kind of I wouldn't say a music producer or a composer, but I like playing instruments and recording that stuff. Sometimes, very rarely, for commercial purposes. And I like to make things, a lot of different things. Things with electronics, things with like, how do you call it? Like crafts for D&D and other TTRPGs. I like painting miniatures. I'm not very good at drawing, but I do prep these games in my notebook in a very colorful way, so I would say I'm an artist. Which type of artist? Well, I'm kind of a jack of all trades and a master of none, but I think for GMing, that's kind of a very good thing, in my opinion. So, how is this gonna go? We have some structure and rules, nothing too heavy. So, my idea now, bear with me, nothing I say or do here is like written in stone. We're gonna change and experiment with this. But the idea is to have a 1 hour lesson and then some time for questions. And if you have a question, you leave it in the chat with the prefix question. Otherwise, I will just glance at the chat. I will not stop talking in this stream. If you want more consultations, you can join our Keeper Draft stream, which is when I prepare for my next game. I'm answering questions, we're hanging out, chilling. And also, you can always jump into our Discord and ask away. with that, we jump to the next slide, and I do have slides. You see, this is a professional, like almost a real course type of thing. So let's get some terms out of the way. You've probably heard about game masters, or dungeon masters, or keepers, or game mothers, puppeteers. There is a ton of different terms. Usually the game chooses a thematically accurate, suitable term for this. But the game master is the one who runs the game, and the name doesn't even matter that much. How does he run the game? We'll talk about that later. Then we have the players. The players are all other people around the table that are playing this game that the dungeon master runs. Then how do they play it? How do they interact with the world and the game? Well, through their characters. Every player will embody a certain character and through them interact with the world. These are called player characters, and we use PCs for short. And session. Session, I have a definition here that was the best I could think of. Session is basically you sitting down and playing the game in one sitting. Like sometimes your story will take multiple sessions, sometimes only one. You will see what I'm talking about. For now, just know that when you and your friends meet, sit down and play, that is called a session. Now we answer the big question, and that is, what are TTRPGs? Well, the term itself stands for tabletop role-playing games. So they are games. And in this context of them being games, the GM is kind of the console. So when you come over to your friend's house and you take the PS controller and you boot up a game, well, that PlayStation, that console, is your GM in this case. The GM describes things, decides what happens, and acts out certain scenarios, certain scenes. These games, as any other game, follow some rules. There are games that have very little rules, there are games that are very rule heavy and have a lot of number crunching, depends on what you like. Then it wouldn't be a game if players didn't interact with it, so players, through their characters, do stuff. But it's important to know, as in any game, that that stuff that players do has consequences. We go back to the GM describing those consequences and deciding how they play out. Another very important aspect, and this is something that we're really gonna focus on in next lessons, is randomness. These games kind of introduce a type of randomness. Most games do it through dice, but other ways are also possible depending on the game. We've seen everything from cards to like Jenga towers, coin flips, even candles. So basically this randomness is what makes the actions that the players want to do risky. Not everything you try will automatically succeed. You will have to roll a die, you will have to make a coin toss. So that's randomness. Another very big aspect of any role-playing game, even if you've played some video games, is that player characters can grow. So these characters are represented by a set of, we can say, numbers that describe how good this character is at certain things. And these numbers can grow. This is something that gets people to return to the game and try to, level up, so to say. And we have a goal of the game. Most would say you are supposed to win most of the games. Well, these games cannot be won, not like literally. And then you can say, well, the goal must be to have fun. But that also doesn't need to stand true, because if we look at books, movies, video games, yes, you are playing some video games to have fun, you are reading some books to have fun, but there are also sad books, there are also horror movies, horror games. Are you reading a sad book to feel fun? Are you watching a horror movie to have fun? Not really. You're doing it to feel something. You're doing it for the stories, for the emotions, for your reactions. And I think, as with every other medium, it stands true for tabletop RPGs as well. But these games, what sets them apart from other mediums is that they are played on the tabletop. So usually and ideally you would be playing them with like pen and paper, some dice around the table all together, and that is in the ideal scenario. There's also ways to play it online, and a lot of people do because, well, friends move away, they find jobs in different places, they live in different countries, and the only way to play these games and enjoy them is through your computer, which doesn't make them video games. We'll talk about that more as well. So, an important aspect of any game is that they're tactile. Even in these virtual settings, you will see that the dice are 3D. You feel something. There is a sound like tack, 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 tack when you roll them. People want to feel that these games are like almost physical. That's why we as game masters will be creating little letters and envelopes and have little miniature figures and a lot of different things to just make it much more, real in a way. And of course, as with anything happening around the table, like any other board game night, you will have food and drinks. You will talk about unimportant stuff. You will joke around. You will laugh. You will enjoy the company of your friends. So it's not that strict. Of course, there are dungeon masters that like it much more stricter, if that's a word, than the others. But at the end of the day, you and your friends are sitting around the table telling stories, and that's what matters. And we play these games at the tabletop by role-playing. So what does that actually mean? And this is a very deep topic, and we're surely going to come back to it. But for now, when we sit down, we're imagining worlds, like when we are reading. So you know that feeling. You're reading for a while now, an hour passed, and you're stuck to that book, and you're there, you're imagining things. Or if you're not much of a reader, you know that feeling when your friend sends you a wall of text, and first you don't want really to read all of that, but then you start reading, and your friend is telling you, oh, I've been to the shopping mall, and you wouldn't believe what happened, and just starts describing things, and in your mind you do have an idea of how that all played out. So you're imagining things. Then you have to imagine characters. Who are you going to be? Who would you want to be? Whose eyes are you going to look at this world from? So it can be you. Most of people, when they start playing, just play a cooler version of themselves. Nothing wrong with that. But after a while you get bored and you start imagining what would a small child do in this situation. Maybe what would a person like an old person do? And you start, if you go to like more fantastical genres, you can maybe ask what would a lizard person do? Like, let's put Mark Zuckerberg in this fantasy tavern and see what he does. So you're imagining who you're going to be. Then you will have to embody those characters. You will have to interact with the world as if you are acting out what this character would do. Now we're gonna come back to that acting out part, because it's not always acting. But the most important thing, in my opinion, when it comes to role-playing is forgetting what you know, because your character doesn't. And I would define role-playing now as an ability to divide and restrain yourself from using the knowledge from the real world and from what you're seeing around the table. Like, you see your friend has bigger numbers on their paper, you don't want to use that because your character doesn't know that. And it takes some practice. It's not really that easy at the beginning, but with time, players and NPCs alike, GMs alike, get this ability to divide things. Now, you're probably a GM, and I'm explaining this like you're a player, but I think it's really necessary for you to understand what the players are going through, because you, my dear GMs, are going to go through this much more often when designing a world that has inhabitants. So you will be role-playing a lot, and it's important for you to know what each of the characters in the world that you're representing knows and what they don't. Now, the last step is to enter the world and imagine, okay, you're ready, you're your character, you know what they know, you know what you want to be, you know everything, you know what you want to do. Now imagine doing it. I fire an arrow. Imagine your character doing it. Imagine that arrow flying and hitting something. At the beginning, this is very important for a dungeon master to describe, and sometimes it's a scene that is worth describing. Sometimes you just say, I fire an arrow, but in your mind you knew that you're gonna fire that arrow, you imagined it, so you imagine doing. Now with all of that together, we have this definition on the screen that says basically what TTRPGs are. Sorry if you hear background noise or like dogs, stuff, never mind. TTRPG stands for Tabletop Role-Playing Game, a cooperative game where players create characters and collaboratively tell a story in a fictional world, usually guided by a game master and a set of rules. Players describe their characters' actions through speech, with results determined by rules, randomness, and GM's narration, creating an interactive and imaginative experience. It's playing pretend, and I have a couple of my own definitions because that's a lot. It's a non-linear story generator. Why I say that? You know those like cards, for example, Joking Hazard, where you like pull 3 cards and you put them down and you have like a linear story in front of you. Well, here no story is linear because every choice that players make will kind of push the story in another direction, and we have randomness. It's almost like no 2 board game nights are the same. Like people are making different choices, and at the end of the day you can go and say, oh, my friend, if you're playing, I don't know, Settlers of Catan, that's a wildly known one. You can say, oh, he took, he screwed me over, he took all my wheat and then I lost. Like every time it will be a bit different. All board games are non-linear story generators, but TTRPGs are different because that's their goal. I also call them interactive theater because we're all kind of role-playing. We're imagining we're in a world that doesn't exist. Our game master is imagining so many different things, setting the scene, using little set pieces to, almost like in a theater where they are using big set pieces to describe the scene. And then they're acting out some things in front of it. Those cardboard clouds are not real, but it's theater. You subvert your disbelief, and that is the same thing here. Why interactive? Because the audience or your players are also engaging. They are jumping in, saying stuff, doing stuff, kind of, leading the story. So interactive theaters, or as I said, the most basic definition would be we're playing pretend. We're taking little toys and saying beep, 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 stuff like we did when we were kids. The difference and why this is much more interesting when you're adults is when you're a kid, you don't know about the world that much, so you can't really do a lot of things, you don't understand a lot of things. But imagine playing pretend where you know about cool stuff, like about things that are, maybe some harsh topics, some dark stuff. You understand the nuance of communication and, people. So that all adds to the pretend part. It becomes much more. You have much more in your toolbox, in a way. And then you might ask, what types of games are there in this wonderful hobby of TTRPGs? Well, you have pretty much everything. You can go and play a game in a fantasy, Lord of the Rings type of setting. That's almost like WoW or any other video game. You can go into modern horror, thriller, Matrix type games where you have motorcycle chases over the roofs and you're, investigating and all that. Or you can go into like games that are sci-fi and have spaceship fights and diplomatic negotiations, much more similar to Star Wars or Dune. And of course, with this, as with any other medium, there is love simulators, or, well, dating simulators and weird things. Yeah, I mean, like with anything else, What happened here? XX% professional. Yeah, I also added, while also being therapy. Well, yeah, you embody someone else. And this is crucial. You try to interact with the world through someone else's eyes, and I think it changes how you think in a way. You now understand people that are maybe like those you were role playing. It's a bit of a, interesting topic, more philosophical. We're not gonna go into that now. We go to the next slide. So I want to show you how it usually plays out. Well, first of all, people want to play, and they don't always know what they want to play, but there is a bunch of people and they say, we want to play a TTRPG. There are solo TTRPG games where a book, almost like an adventure book, tells you what to do, and you roll dice and you have prompts. And there is a subset of the hobby that is for solo gamers. We're probably going to talk about that way down the line, but they exist. Then the game master has a game in mind, knows the rules okay-ish. It's a big misconception that you need to read the whole book, know all the rules right away. Bigger games like D&D and Pathfinder have their own wikis that you can reference during the game. You just need to know the basics and like feel comfortable enough to not know everything. Like, you will encounter, I certainly do encounter situations where I don't really know what the rules would dictate, but we rule it on the fly, we check it later, doesn't matter. We will certainly discuss more about that in next lesson. But what is very interesting is that your players don't have to learn the rules, because the GM is the console. So imagine you, like me, I went to my friend's house just the other night and he gave me to try Rocket League. I know I haven't tried Rocket League yet. It's a game on PlayStation where cars hit balls and, play football, soccer. Imagine a guy who came up with that. Like, what is a game that would work and people would get hooked? Cars hitting balls. Yeah, that's a game, and I didn't know the rules, I didn't know the controls. He just told me, like, press this to go forward, this backward, this is where you jump, here, have a practice mode, do stuff. And that's kind of how this goes as well. Your players sit around the table, they don't really have to know what they're doing at the beginning. After a while they will get into the rules, and things you don't know, the GM will help you. And if the GM doesn't know, Google it, check the book, whatever. It's important to keep the game going, but you're not going to have any players if you expect them to sit down and read a whole book for them to play. Of course, there are people that really enjoy reading those books, more power to you. And it's important now that everyone figured out they're gonna play, you know which game you're gonna play, players are ready to sit and just let the GM do their thing. Well, the GM has to have some material to run. So it's not just that we're sitting around the table, the GM has something prepared. Now, this can be a pre-written adventure, sometimes called a module. There is a bunch of them for every game. Usually you would find them online. What I do is I would just Google, like, name of the game, best beginner module, Reddit, check what modules exist. Usually for indie games, these modules, to get them in PDF form, are just a couple of dollars, and you go through the PDF, like mark some things that you think are important, and yeah, you run your players through that. Or there is another approach, and that is to write your own adventure or homebrew. I wouldn't advise you doing this right away. There are people that are very good at creating worlds and that are already in the world building hobby that would like people to explore their worlds. But it takes a bit of practice before you can actually just plop people into your world. So I would always advise to try out a tutorial scenario if it exists for that game, or one of those beginner scenarios first, and then think of how you would create an adventure from what you already have. We're gonna talk a lot about world building here, and you can already find on this channel some videos that go over my approach. You can even watch me probably on Wednesday as I prepare my session for the next game. So yeah, you will see how I approach world building as well. So yeah, we're ready. We have our game, we have our material, and what comes next? Well, we have the world, and now we need people to put into this world. We need characters, and this is something that's more of a player's jurisdiction. So with GM's help, they create characters. Every character is basically a collection of facts of what they can do and who they are. And what they can do is usually governed by what is called a character sheet. Now, the character sheet just has some stats. It's just a name for a set of numbers and notes that are representing character traits, and some gear, which are kind of notes on what the character owns and how they can use it. And I can show you some examples of character sheets. You can see they differ quite a bit, but there are some things that are the same. So let's see, for example, let's do this. You should be seeing me now. So for example, this is a character sheet, and this is for a game called Index Card RPG. And you can see there are some numbers that describe how good your character, is at certain things. Then we have another one here. See, this is much less structured. You have a couple of lines for your notes to make sure that you remember stuff. We have, let me just check if this is something important. No. Then we have something like this. This is from our own game, and you would have, again, some numbers on both sides and some notes down there. You even have a specific place for gear. Oh, this is mirrored. Yeah, you can't read, but it's just for you to get a feel for it. Then we have some that are really stylish, like this is from a game. I think this is a third-party character sheet for a game called Troika. And most important numbers are just 3 numbers. Just 3 numbers represent your characters. Everything else, like inventory and other stuff, is less important. You mostly use these 3 numbers. See how cool it looks. And then you have games that have a lot of numbers. You can see this is from Cult Cthulhu, 2 pages, a lot of stuff is happening here. So people that have played D&D, and I don't know why I don't have a D&D one here, that would be very useful, but people who play D&D and want to get more people into the hobby, they show up with character sheets, not much more simple than this, and say, hey, I want to play this game, and you look at your Excel spreadsheet and you're like, nah, dude, that looks too complicated. So I would like people to know that there are simpler games. You don't need to play D&D. There are games that tick every box that D&D ticks, but are much simpler. Oh, I just now see that you're not seeing everything because of my little face. So let's talk about who the characters are. Well, we said that what they can do is governed by mechanics and character sheet, the rules basically. Well, who they are is up to the player. As long as it makes sense in the world and the GM says, yeah, that works, that's fine. You're not gonna play, I don't know, Transformers robot person in Lord of the Rings, although you could, but it depends on what type of game you people, like everyone at the table wants to play, and if the game supports it in a way. Of course, if it doesn't, you can bend the rules, and that's one important lesson. Rules are there to give structure, but they can be bent. I mean, you're playing pretend, so it's okay to, figure out what works for your group. So, players make up this character, who this character is, and this is basically done through a backstory and a personality. The backstory is, well, just the origin story of the character. It doesn't need to be anything special, it can be just one sentence. Hey, my character comes from a faraway land, he is obsessed with collecting snails, and he heard there is a lot of snails here. Cool. Everything's set, we go. And the personality is something that, as I've said, you can just go with no person, like your own personality, and you're just a guy who wants to collect snails in this world. That's completely fine. Or you can think of something. This character is obsessed with stealing, or they will lie, they have a hidden agenda, they're naive, they, like any of these, you can just think of something that is like a personality for this character. And I would always say that, especially in the beginning, it's easier to have like a simple quirk than to try and make a nuanced, personality that works for like a very convoluted story. Like we've seen so many movies and like very good works of art where you have characters that kind of go through this development, they have their character arc, and that's cool. And a lot of people want to recreate that, but it's hard. Mostly, we remember those characters. Groot. We remember Groot. Everyone remembers Groot. He just says Groot. He's a nice little plant guy. Why wouldn't you play a nice little plant guy? So it's easier to pick one quirk, go with that at the beginning. You will see that through interacting with the world, characters will kind of get their shape eventually. We're gonna talk more about character building both for GMs and the players a lot in next set lessons, but for now this is all you need. I've went on a tangent there a little bit, but if you look at these two graphs, that is all you need. I'll have to figure out a better way to handle presentations on stream. By the way, these would be better as videos, like better production quality, but I really think that having them live, eventually people might join and have questions. I would really like there to be that interactive moment there. Bow. So, you have your characters, you have your games, you're all ready. So, the GM and the players now need to meet, actually sit down and play. And it can be in person, as I mentioned, usually around the table, or online through platforms called VTTs, virtual tabletops. Now, there is a lot of different VTTs, especially for different games. Of course, the most covered games are the most popular one, but there are VTTs that support community-made stuff, and people will adjust those VTTs for a lot of different games. Some need to be paid, some are free. Mostly the paid ones have more features, more things that the GM can like play around with. But at the end of the day, sharing your screen as the GM and just talking on Discord also works. VTTs just add, simulating lightning in a certain room, or like what you would do with little miniatures and the tactile part. That's what VTTs add. And you don't really need it at the end of the day. You can just go full on Discord session, cameras, and just talk. But it's nice to know that these exist. And now you're playing the game, and that is a session. Yeah, we said that we're gonna talk about the length of the game. Well, if you're gonna tell the whole story through just one sitting, as written here, some stories can be told through just one session. Well, that is called a one-shot. And it's like a movie. It is supposed to have the story begin and end in one sitting, usually 3 to 5 hours, and you're done. You can go home and remember this one adventure. It has its upsides and its downsides, also something that we're gonna be diving much more into later. And also, some stories need more than just one session, and these are called campaigns. They can go through like 3 sessions, 5 sessions, 10 sessions, however many you want. We had a campaign that lasted almost 100 sessions. We also had some that were over in 3. It's like TV shows. The number of episodes can vary. They usually aim at around 8 to 10, but we sit around the table and pretend we don't need any rules, so it can be a very short campaign or one spanning years of time. And now that you have all that, the GM brings the world to life. How? Well, by doing a lot of things. The GM starts describing the scenes, and we're gonna demonstrate this in a much simpler way, but the GM describes the scenes. People do stuff. The GM is acting out conversations and like talking to the characters as their own characters in the world. They're keeping track of the rules. Also, the GM's responsibility is to create a safe environment here. No one wants to be teased, and everyone should get some spotlight, and you're basically there to make sure that the atmosphere around the table is healthy and safe. The GM is also the judge. As we said, you can't really argue about the rules with the PlayStation. You shouldn't be able to argue a lot about the rules with the GM. So when something happens, the GM should be ready to put their hand down and say, this is how it is in the rules. And even if it's not in the rules, the GM is the person that makes the final say. It is important to have this authority, otherwise, why do they need you? Like, you are the game. If they can just play by talking, hey, I'm succeeding at everything, there is no challenge, there is no story. So the GM must remain in a place of authority. Then the GM will create a bunch of different challenges for the characters, improvising how those challenges can be overcome on the spot. And like something I think personally is very important, the GM will try to feel the room and feel the pacing. Sometimes you will want something amazing to happen when your players are kind of starting to look at their phones, but then when you see they're maybe tired, you might wind it down a bit and then slowly end the session. So the GM is there to dictate this pacing, and I think that is very important. And the strange thing is, this is just a few things that the GM is juggling while the game is being played. And I know this is a lot, but fear not. What a cringe set of slides. As Matt Colville says in one of his videos, and I really recommend them for learning more about tabletop RPGs, this hobby is something that you can suck at and still have fun while getting better at it. And this is very encouraging for me, because when I started playing, oh man, I had 2 or 3 players and I tried to run a game for them, and I had this feeling that I'm doing everything wrong. But they continued coming back, and that must mean it was fun. You would expect an excuse here and there and people not showing up, but they showed up weekly. So I sucked, and it was very fun. And together we made it better and better, and we had bigger and bigger appetites. And I really like where we are right now, but I will never say that I prefer it over what we had before. It's all fun, it was all enjoyable, and it was all very it made us, the bond between us, stronger. So yes, I think this is a very important quote, and it was pretty and dramatically said, life-changing for me. Now another quote that I really like is, imagining mundane things is easy. Whenever you find yourself as a GM with your players going off script, this is something that I will address. I'm not really okay with that saying, but whenever you are afraid that you don't have anything prepared, just remember, imagining mundane things is easy. If I tell you, you walk outside your house and you look around and there is a car coming and the traffic light is turning to red, will you be able to tell me what is most likely to happen? Yeah, because you've seen it 1,000 times. The same goes for a lot of different things. If you see a dog, it might bark, or it might be an aggressive dog, or it might be sleeping. It's easy to imagine what would happen in a fictional scenario if the things you're imagining are things you're kind of familiar with. And telling stories in these games is just like, okay, we're playing in a world that is like Lord of the Rings fantasy stuff, or sci-fi, or whichever type of game and setting you choose. People are still people. There will be things that are always the same. If everything is too different from our own world and understanding, well then, how would we get any sort of emotional reaction? So imagining mundane things is easy, and that is a good thing for you as the GM. And this is one for me. As I said, there is no such thing as a derailed session. So this is kind of true and isn't true at the same time. As I said, the game master has some material prepared, and depending on the type of game, the game master will expect people to go and play through beat by beat through this material. On the other hand, players might expect for them to have complete freedom, to be immersed in the world and play something more akin to a sandbox. The biggest problem is when the game master and the players expect two different things. If the game master expects a linear story, which isn't bad, a linear story works. We saw movies, books, even video games. There are linear video games. Not all video games are sandboxes like Ubisoft would like you to believe. If a GM wants it to be linear, well then the players need to know about this, and it's expected from them to cooperate. Yeah, of course they can go left and right a bit, make some shortcuts, make some, like find their own way. They can go around it, but at the end of the day, they should be returning to the module that they're playing. You will see when your GM really like directly shows you, hey, this is the path glows, like video games are doing with yellow paint. If you don't know what yellow paint is, Google it. Basically a way that is like a standard way not to break immersion, but to tell the players, hey, this way. That's what the GM will do. The players should be there to follow, or they're not really nice. It should be a mutual understanding there. On the other hand, if the GM wants to run something that's open-ended and they have some part of the world that they've prepared and they want players to go there, what happens if the players diverge? This is where we get to a derailed session or a derailed campaign. The GM is not really sure how to handle the situation. Well, I always say that the GM skill that you get good at like pretty fast is bullshitting on the fly. And when you get good at this, there is nothing that your players can do that you don't have an answer to, especially if they're interacting with some things that are non-magical and they're mundane. As we said, mundane things are easy to imagine, so you will be expected to come up with stuff on the fly. And you shouldn't be afraid of this. You shouldn't say, oh, but they're not gonna see this cool thing that I have behind that door. Move the cool thing in front of them. Put the door in the middle of nowhere. Let them open it. Just like this idea that it's all linearly written for you as the game master and that you present it, it's lies. You're a smoke and mirrors. They don't know what you're thinking. You just move your things around. Try to find a way to funnel them into what you have prepared. And if you can't do it, don't worry that they're not gonna see the cool thing. They are gonna do something else that's cool. They're gonna remember it. One of the best sessions that we ever had were the ones where we were improvising. I had no idea what was gonna happen. And at some point you stop being afraid and you start to really like it because it surprises you too. It's like you are playing out this movie that you already know how it's gonna end. But that's not very fun. At one point your players do something and everything changes and you feel that you have become more engaged. I'm all again going maybe off topic on a tangent here, but I think these are interesting topics. So let's imagine an example. And you will see through this example, I will try to play out how these sessions really sound. Like you might have watched Matt Mercer or Brennan Lee Mulligan on Dimension 20 or some other actual play show, and you might have thought, wow, they're really acting. But not everyone is acting. It's completely normal for people to just say stuff in their own voice. Even more common, it is common for people to talk about other stuff around the table, like ask about, hey, are we gonna order food? The GM doesn't need to be an expert of narration and paint a picture with their words. It's usually a lot of ums and uhs and and thinking. It's like that. Um, so yeah, it's much more down to earth than you might think. Yeah, good note. Thank you, other me. Right, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna draw stuff. Get some stuff out of the way. Get some stuff here. So we will imagine that we have here. We will imagine that we have two players that want to play a game, and they will be Bob and Sarah, and they want to play a made-up game. So we don't need to know what this game is gonna be, but we're gonna have to do some things. Let me just take this. So as we said, we have our players, and I will be the dungeon master for these two. So they want to make characters, and I tell them they need character sheets. So we will have two character sheets. I will just label them Bob and Sarah. You can name your characters anything. Usually you don't name them the same way as you are named, but who cares? And as we said, we define two things: what these characters can do and who they are. Let's say a lot of games have what are called stats, usually a way to label how good you are at things. So some of common ones are, let's say, strength, dex, maybe charisma, and we can say they have some hearts. You will see and they have some hearts. So we say on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong is Bob? Pretty strong, muscular guy. We can say 7. How fast is he? Well, if he's muscle, you know, maybe he isn't that fast. Let's say he's average. And how good looking is he? Like, I'm making up what stats there are here, but this is just like a proof of concept of character sheets. Well, he is not very good looking, maybe 2, maybe even like we can go -2, like he's you know, like this guy. Sarah, on the other hand, is like not that strong. Maybe she's average looking, and maybe she's very fast, like let's say 7. And these hearts are, if you've played any video games, they're how hard you are to be like injured or defeated, how far away from death you are, how like depends on the game, but usually you need your hearts. In a lot of games it's called HP, health points, hit points. If it goes down, it's bad. That's the gist of it. So we can imagine some things here. We have these two sheets, and now the last thing we need is a way to ask questions and answer them. And for that we need some sort of randomization. As we said, usually it's the dice, and a lot of games use a set of 7 dice, mostly for asking any type of question doing any type of thing in the game, you will be rolling a d20. Why is it called a d20? Because it has 20 sides. And then as you get into the hobby, we'll start calling the regular little cube dice d6s, and you will sound very smart. So, as this is really memed a lot in this community, but let's say that our characters meet in a tavern. So the GM would describe something like, and I'm improvising this on the spot, so we'll see how it goes. I have my players, they have their character sheets, and I tell them, you're sitting at a table in this very clean and empty tavern. There is almost no one there. You saw the bartender 10 minutes ago, but he's not taken your order yet. And something feels strange in this tavern, so what do you do? And then Bob might say, well, my character would like to go to the bar and try to steal some drinks. If the barkeep is not giving us anything and not taking our order, I want to steal it. Okay, but then me as the GM say, as you're entering the place where behind the bar, you see, like with your peripheral vision, that the bartender is actually like there, but with his head in the boxes, and he is like swearing, and he's very angry because he can't find something that he's looking for. Are you okay with being seen, or do you just want to like secretly snatch something and run away? And Bob says, yeah, I think I'm gonna just take it and run away, but I don't want him to see me. Cool. Roll me some dice. And then my player rolls a die, and he rolled a 1. We're not gonna talk about special numbers like 1 and 20 yet, but he rolled a 1. How you, as the Dungeon Master, know if something succeeded or failed is you usually have some number that this has to beat. Let's say, for the sake of this example, anything that happens in this scene must be bigger than number 10. So 1 is not more than 10, but we can look at this character sheet and say, okay, dexterity is kind of the measure of how, you know, how slick you are with your movements, how precise. Maybe that's good for sneaking, so we might add +5 plus that dexterity to this roll. Now we have 6. 6 is still not good enough to beat this, so we say the barkeep saw you and angrily starts yelling, what are you doing? You little thief, come here. And he takes a bat and starts running towards you. What do? Well, you say, I want to run and jump over the countertop and run back to Sarah. I ask, Sarah, do you want to do something? Sarah says, well, if there is a chair here, a small stool, I want to prepare it so when Bob jumps over the counter and the barkeep runs behind him, I want to throw the chair at the barkeep. I say, cool. Both of you roll dice. Bob, you will throw me dexterity again because you're trying to do like an acrobatic thing. Sarah, you're gonna do... Well, let's do a dexterity check as well to see if you can throw the stool precisely enough. Cool. We roll for Bob, 17. Plus we said 5. That's a lot. He rolled a lot more than 10, so he jumps over the countertop, slides, whoosh, like this. As the barkeep, and I don't have proper miniatures for this, as the barkeep comes from here, he saw him, Bob, leap. That's when Sarah takes the chair, throws it at the barkeep. Let's see how good she does. She does 11 plus 7, so she hits him and he falls to his back. Now the barkeep, mumbling and swearing, stands up and says, I'm gonna kick you out. But Sarah says, I want to come and try to, you know, sweet talk him into giving us free drinks, and we say we're just fooling around. Maybe she does a monologue that sounds really cool. Maybe she just tells me, I want to do this like I just did. I say, okay, let's roll some dice. So she rolls, oh, another 1. And +5, that's a 6, not bigger than 10. He doesn't fall for it. And you see, he would then ask them to go outside before he calls the guards. And they would maybe leave, maybe stay. But this is one scene. This is something that happened. And this is how these games usually go. Now, you imagine this with having 5 players and a lot more numbers and a lot more rules, and you get some of the more popular games. You will also ask, well, how do we know, how far player characters can move? Rules in the book, you will find it there, and we will talk more about that as well. You might ask, well, how do we know whose turn it is to play? This is something that changes. When you're just role-playing, it's very free-form, but whenever you have a conflict, like for example here, you would go into something called an encounter mode, which basically means that everyone gets a turn and you go around the table, and it's more board gamey. But this is the gist. Now, imagine that while they were leaving, the barkeep took the chair that was here and returned the favor, threw the chair at them. They roll for the barkeep. He rolled a 10, which is, he probably has also a sheet like this, so probably more than 10, and he hits Sarah in the back of the head. I might say you lose 1 heart. And you see, this is just a preview. This is everything you need to have to understand how these games are played. Do this for a couple of hours and I'm pretty sure you're gonna tell a fantastic story. So yeah, let's imagine another scenario. Okay, cool. Let's do a lava thing. By the way, you have to love my stream deck made out of garbage. Let's say, and if you know, you know, let's say we are dwarves in space that are tasked with mining stones and minerals. Rocks and stones to the bones. They're doing their own thing. They probably have their own sheets. I would say gunner. And maybe engineer. This would be the gunner and this would be the engineer. They might have, I don't know, how good they are at seeing things. Let's say gunner is 5, engineer is 3. They might be how good they are at shooting things. I'm drawing little guns. Let's say gunner is like 7. I'm not going to 10, but we can say 10 or whatever. And engineer is like 4. And we might say they both have 2 hearts or whatever. And we can say that the gunner has the ability to shoot 2 enemies at once, and the engineer can make trap, let's say, whatever. They have some abilities. Then we can say, if we made these characters in a more complicated system and everything, we can say like, who is the gunner? Well, gunner is George, and he has, I don't know, daughter, and this daughter has a certain toy that she really likes, and she has been asking him to bring her on one of these missions for a long time, and he said yes because he knows this one is really easy. But he told her to wait in the chamber before this one. And she was there with maybe some traps around to keep her safe. But they are mining and doing their own thing. At one point, the GM says, roll me if you notice anything. So let's say this first stuff. They roll. Let's say the engineer rolled 14. I tell him, you hear as in this lava filled cave, through the holes where lava is falling down, some like some sounds of like clicking and clacketing. What do you do? And he would say, I turn around, I investigate the nearest hole, and I prepare my trap. I say, okay. Gunner, what do you do? Gunner George. He says, well, faster we finish with this, the faster we'll go home. I will continue mining. Oh, we can add just a mining stat. Let's say he's 3 and engineer might have 8. Engineer is very good at mining. Say, okay, roll me your mining thing. He rolls very high. This is a 20. So I say, yeah, as the clacking becomes louder and louder, you're finishing up all the work and you're ready to go, packing everything up. And as you do, as you turn around, you see a swarm of bugs start to appear from those holes. And now, as my engineer said, I was preparing my trap. I say, okay, your trap is deployed. You have a little turret. And the turret starts shooting at things. And we play out what happens. The bugs would probably attack. Things would happen. We would roll for shooting. And at the end, as all bugs are defeated, I might say to the gunner, George, you come to the corpse of one of these bugs and you look closer and you see your daughter's toy in its mouth, its mandibles, yet you don't see blood. He would then maybe say, I rush to the previous room as fast as I can and try to see if I can piece together what happened. I tell him, okay, you enter the room, you look around, there is no daughter, but there is no blood. You see an empty room, all your traps are destroyed. What do you do? He would say, I try to, look for tracks and see if I can determine in which direction she went. Say, okay, roll me again for noticing things. 13. Cool, you succeed. So you see some very strange tracks that are much bigger than the regular bugs, and you see them leading to a certain hole. In this hole, you hear a lot of noise, and as you point your flashlight in it, you see a lot of eggs. It must be leading to a nest. Maybe a bigger bug queen took her to be a prepared lunch for youngs when they hatch, as wasps do on planet Earth in those books that you read so long ago about that strange planet that you all supposedly came from. And see, now they have a reason to go deeper and to rescue the girl. And now we have successfully, as game masters, used something that is not on this piece of paper. We're not talking about the stats and what the characters can do, but we attacked who George is. And that is why both things are important. We can always play just a game, but the roleplay part comes when you don't call him a gunner anymore, but you start calling him George. And I would say that is it for today in terms of examples. I really hope I give it justice. It's really hard to put myself back into the shoes of not knowing what this is. It's a very strange hobby, and honestly, watching all of the videos on YouTube really helps. Matt Colville's videos, Runehammer videos, House DM videos. What else really helped me? There is a bunch of new channels. Renegade Rolls, fantastic channel. Barlow Keep, fantastic channel. Um, yeah, if you really want to delve into the topic, don't be afraid and don't really try to focus just on one game. Try to understand what makes a session fun at first. And try out simpler games. If you want my recommendations from where to start, Index Card RPG, read that book, try that game. Troika, also, if you like whimsical, psychedelic, strange sci-fi things, Troika is very nice. Index Card RPG, on the other hand, covers uh, a couple of different things. You can find some sci-fi stuff, you can find some things that are fantasy. The thing is, it has less strict things in writing, so you will have to improvise a lot, which I think is a muscle that is really worth, exercising early. So, in next lessons, we will cover more in detail topics such as characters, learning rules, understanding randomness. That is one that I'm really excited about. More about role playing and how all that works when you have a conversation between multiple people that are imaginary. How to like make sure the flow of the game makes sense. What types of games exist, like genres, schools of thought. Not all GMs think like me. A lot of GMs think like there's literally schools of thought. There's like preferences, and hopefully you will find your preferences to that. And the most important is how do you keep your shit together at the table, juggling so many things. So yeah, these are not gonna be in any particular order. I'm gonna figure out how to structure this on the fly. But what is going to be our schedule? Well, I was thinking about weekly. It would be really cool if we can do it weekly, but I cannot promise that. Maybe 2 weeks. I will schedule it on YouTube at least a couple of days in advance, so those who want to participate can put the little remind me thing on. When it comes to consultations and any questions you might have, we do have a Discord channel. I will be answering questions there. If you want a longer call with me or something, we can try to make that happen for sure. And yeah, also questions in the chat. As we said, big all caps question and then your question. And now we come to the part where I will be answering those. Since this is the first one and there's almost no one watching, I guess there's no questions, but don't worry. If you're watching this later, just hop on our Discord and I will answer all those questions. I also have a Patreon. Truth be told, I don't know why I'm not posting anything special there. In the future, I might make some sort of PDFs to make this easier. For now, it's just there if you want to like toss a coin my way. It would be really nice of you. And yeah, that's it. Wow, advertising in it. Right. So, yeah. I'm not used to streams ending this fast. But we're gonna have another one on Wednesday when we're gonna do our session prep. It's gonna be very fun. If you're into this sort of thing, even if you don't know what we're doing, like it's gonna be cool. I'm also trying out this very little room that I'm in for these lessons. Hopefully we can have all this set up like this, so I can do a lot more streams because it's just sitting down and clicking record. Cool stuff. Well, thank you very much to all those who jumped in and gave me a little bit of their time. I hope to see you somewhere in the interwebs. Until then, I wish you happy gaming.